your eyes for a minute to see, it just ain't free. Lift your eyes for a minute to see, it just ain't free. Raise your chin from your chest, you know that love, it ain't your best. Lift your eyes for a minute to see, it just ain't free. You know these days, they ain't like no other. There you go, touching your phone, more than your lover. If you can just take a rest from the screen, honey, it's a mess. Lift your eyes for a minute to see, it just ain't free. No, I don't wanna be righteous, telling you what to do. I must admit, oh baby, I'm addicted as you. Now I'm preaching, I put down the phone. Next minute I can leave it alone. Lift your eyes for a minute to see, it just ain't free. What have we come to? Wasting time every day. We can't live without them. Trying to throw all our troubles
Welcome to episode 4, The Reunion. And we wish it could be a real physical reunion as we are seeing happen in the US, Europe, and other parts of the world. But soon, we in Asia Pacific will get there. Because today in Singapore, we woke up to an article that was bylined by 3 Singapore ministers about living normally with COVID-19. And it was the last point that caught our attention. 5th, we will be able to travel again, at least to countries that have also controlled the virus and turn it into an endemic form. We will recognize each other's vaccination certificates, and travelers, especially those vaccinated, can get themselves tested before departure and be exempted from quarantine with a negative test upon arrival. At last, the news we've been waiting for in Singapore, clarity and commitment towards a road trip, towards a roadmap where we can go on a road trip to transit to this new normal. This week too, we had the Thai government gave the green light for the Phuket Sandbox to open on July 1, paving the way for other Thai resorts to follow. Bali waits its turn, hopefully by the end of July, and Cambodia by the 4th quarter of this year. All 3 places are represented in this episode. A super high note to mark our reunion with, since we staged our first round-the-world virtual summit this day a year ago. So as always, thank you to our traveling sponsors and partners for making this roadshow possible. Your company makes it less lonely on the road. And to you watching us out there, your company makes it less lonely too around our campfire. So remember to use the chat, take part in our polling, ask questions, and let's do a virtual group hug together. We are also grateful to our venue partner for this episode. Now, one of the great things about doing this Roadshow, which is a monthly series of events, is that we've been able to take it on the road around Singapore, at least, before we can travel. And we've been able to work with partners who have evolved to the new world of events. So we started at Marina Bay Sands in April. We went on to the Fairmont. And now here we are at Hybrid Experience at Suntec, Singapore. Episode 5, July 29th, we'll be at the Resorts World Convention Center, where conditions permitting, we will have a physical reunion of 50 people. And for the final episode, August 26th, we will return to Marina Bay Sands, after which we will take a short break before planning for the greatest travel homecoming of all time, WiT Singapore, October 18th to 20th. Now, without further ado, I'm so delighted and so happy to welcome my colleagues from the North Star Travel Group. We have Kevin May, Editor-in-Chief for PhocusWire, and Pete Comeau, Managing Director of Phocuswright, to join me and talking about the overview of developments in the online travel world in the past year. So, hi guys.
Hello.
Hi, Hoon.
Hey, hi.
Hey,
Good
Hoon.
to
How are
see
you?
you. Pete,
Yeah, great to see you as well.
Thanks for making time. I know that Phocuswright Europe starts today with your Young Leader Summit, right, today?
It does, yes. Young Leader Summit kicks off in about, it's 4 a.m. my time, kicks off in about 2 hours.
You are so dedicated, Pete. 4 a.m. So thank you for taking the time. So let's go on a road trip together, okay? And we look forward to doing a real road trip. But for now, I've prepared a couple of slides, and this shows the different roads that the different brands are taking after COVID, which way forward, right? And so the first off the blocks, if you see from here, is Airbnb, which had a spectacular IPO. And Kevin, you wrote a piece on the most comprehensive updates on their product so far. So Kevin, tell us what makes Airbnb a winner at this time?
It's a good question, actually, because if you roll back exactly a year ago to your, as you said, your intro, when we were doing the first one of these, Airbnb was in a bit of trouble. Brian Chesky had said that it was the worst time they could ever imagine. They were almost going out of business. 6 weeks later, they announce a public listing, and 3 months later, they list with a fairly spectacular valuation. Now, what makes that very interesting for us is that they're now under a tremendous amount of scrutiny, and they can only do things that advance their share price because they have a fiduciary responsibility to do so. So I think as this year pans out, it will be very interesting to see how long-lasting this vacation rental or private accommodation surge has been. Is it just waiting for people to get back into enjoying hotels again? Because that's the apparent reason, is that there is a general unease about hotels in comparison to vacation rentals. So what happens, let's say, in 3 or 4 months' time as to whether hotels bounce back? But Airbnb has had a pretty spectacular 6 months, almost a recovery in and of itself, I would say.
Totally. So let's go to Pete, our data guy. And we're definitely seeing a trend towards vacation rentals, alternative accommodation. So Pete, can you share with us a data point on how that market is playing out?
Yeah, I actually have two for you. So we've been measuring short-term rental incidents for, over a decade now. And that's the percent of travelers who've stayed in a short-term rental in the past year. So back in the early days of the category, let's say 2007, 2008, we were far below 10%. And that number passed the 12% threshold in 2012. And in 2020, we measured incidence rate at 34%. And that may not seem like a huge jump from a decade ago, but it was actually 20% over 2019. And this is pretty significant because over the past 5 years, we've been hovering around that 30% barrier. And we finally jumped through that, and we jumped through it in a pretty significant way. The second stat, we're closing in on nearly half of the US population who are comparison shopping between hotels and rentals. So the category has truly officially hit the mainstream.
Yeah, In fact, I've been seeing comments on social media that says that we shouldn't be calling it alternative accommodation anymore, that it's mainstream. So interesting. So let's go to the second company, which is Trip.com Group, right? And for me, the early China recovery gives Trip a head start, right? Whether it's in APAC or globally. And having that dual listing in Hong Kong as well as NASDAQ gives it a greater wealth of funds, right? But the world will have to get on without Chinese travelers for a while, unfortunately, because it doesn't look like their borders are going to open anytime soon. And APAC will be hard hit, right? Because our top 3 outbound markets from APAC are 1, China, 2, South Korea, and Japan. So, Kevin, is Europe putting APAC on the back burner for now? Like, this market is not for us for the next 12 months?
Where I sit today in the UK, the whole of Europe is on the back burner from a UK's perspective for a start. It's going to be an awkward 3 or 4 months, as I said, with relation to Airbnb, but just the general travel market as a whole. Countries have different ways of authorizing which other countries their citizens can travel to. And I think they're just the European Union and the UK, now that we're no longer part of it, unfortunately, we're just trying to unravel how to send our citizens to our own countries within this continent, let alone sending people to the Far East or the US or North America, Latin America, or indeed welcoming those residents to Europe. So, it seems like it's a really early time to be even thinking about whether there's going to be, intercontinental travel, let alone intracontinental travel.
Yeah, I think, the thing about this crisis is that it's really sort of sent us all back to our corners of the world, right? And we're all just kind of preoccupied with what's in front of us and, not about the other stuff that's going on. So really, this is the characteristic of this crisis. So let's go on to Traveloka, okay? Which is basically going on, and they're saying, they're going to go for a lifestyle services platform. That's what they're going for. They're hoping to go for an IPO with SPAC. So, the thing about lifestyle services platform is it seems to be a particularly Asian thing. We got Klook going that way. We got Meituan. Any similar developments that you're seeing in the US or Europe?
So I'll jump in here. So not so much in the US, and I think that's due mainly to the large, heavily entrenched players that are really controlling different pieces of that lifestyle market. So you think about Amazon, for example, who really controls e-commerce. Our friend Brad Gerstner, who well, Hoon, had to venture over to Southeast Asia to leverage the SPAC market with Grab. South America is a little bit different. Obviously, we have Rappi down there based in Colombia, starting to make a little bit of traction, expanding into Brazil, Mexico, and other markets. And it's really around that local payment piece. And I think that's probably why we haven't seen one of these super apps really develop any sort of scale other than, the big social platforms. And I suppose Google, who we'll, I'm sure, talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, this is, to me, quite a wide open space, right? As you're talking about Grab going IPO with SPAC, and then how they will morph into travel as well, and how they will get into travel. So this whole space is wide open, very interesting to watch. Let's go to TripAdvisor, another company that we're watching, making a big bet that travel will be like Netflix. And Kevin, you wrote a piece about it, with the travel TripAdvisor Plus subscription model. So do you think it will work or not?
I think TripAdvisor is desperately hoping that it does. They've stated that they've got a lot of ideas that they want to develop this thing. It launched officially in the US earlier on this week. They plan to roll it out in Europe. Anything with regards to subscription services, I think, needs a little bit more careful thought than just saying initially, okay, you subscribe and you can get a discount on hotels or attractions, because its usefulness, I think, only becomes around frequency. And people aren't traveling frequently anyway at the moment. But once all this, once everything starts recovering again, travel is still not a regular thing, which is why Traveloka and others are getting into more lifestyle services and things like that, because they want the utility that they provide to be front of mind, other than just when you're thinking about a trip. So
Totally.
the first kind of evolution of that has come this week. They talked about doing the deal with Hertz. So now if you're a TripAdvisor Plus member, you can get a discount on a Hertz rent-a-car, which you might do as a local, let alone as a traveler. So that's, I think, the first signs of the TripAdvisor Plus thing kind of morphing into something else and just being more useful than just to travelers.
Yeah, so plugging on more everyday services onto that platform to, to deserve that subscription. Okay, so we have to move along to our on our road trip, and so I'm going to lump WeGo, which is building another leg to stand on with their shop cash model while the travel leg is crippled. But the good news is Middle East is coming back, Saudi Arabia leading outbound travel. We have Agoda really going into a deeper local play with their ASQ products, and that will really stand them in good stead, I think, when the market comes back, right? Like really having strong local roots. We have Booking.com going for the connected journey. They just named a new APAC MD, Laura Holdsworth, today. And then Expedia going from transaction play to becoming the ultimate traveler's companion. So Kevin, quickly, give us your take on the Booking.com connected journey that they are trying to build.
Yeah, so it goes back to what we were just talking about, which is super app and lifestyle services, but a light version. So Glenn Fogel in the last earnings call was quoted as saying they want people to use the app more than anything else. Now, that isn't to buy toothbrushes and other things, but they want the Booking.com app to be the all thing to all people. Apparently, 2/3 of their bookings come through the app now. The flights thing has really taken off. They through the Priceline brand, they bought the fly-in service to help them build out flights. So, but this isn't anything new. I mean, Booking Holdings and Glenn have been talking about this for actually a couple of years now. But it is starting to take shape. They want to add attractions and transfers and ground transportation, and again be the one-stop shop for everything. And I think you're starting to see that. Talking about brand Expedia, the ultimate travel companion, TripAdvisor. They're all kind of getting into this idea that it's not just about selling hotels or a flight anymore. It's the full package, which is kind of ironic because that's what offline travel agents used to do anyway. They sold the full package, but now the online players are catching up.
We're
25 years later,
we're kind of swinging
We
back to
really
the traditional world, right? And have a travel agent next to you, except the travel agent is digital, both online and offline. So the last one is really a quick one. ClearTrip acquired by Flipkart. We've seen marketplaces, come into the picture for sure, and later on. We have a panel with Ticket.com co-founder Gary Undasa is speaking, and Ticket.com was bought by Blibli, an e-commerce play in Indonesia some years ago. So interesting. We have suppliers now wanting to work with names like Lazada, Shopee, rather than, so travel is kind of branching out. Okay, let's go to our second part of our road trip, which is basically, I'm going to lump the tours and activities sector in one area, which is Klook. Again, building travel services platform. KK saying we want a curated marketplace. Get Your Guide, acquiring a physical tour operator guided tours. Global Tix in Singapore, really doubling down on enterprise tech. So, Kevin, what are your observations on what's happening in this market? We are seeing this merging on online, offline, and online again?
Yes, I think what's most interesting about tours and activities is it's probably the last thing on a traveler's mind at the moment is just thinking about the museum and trip and stuff like that. So it's been particularly tough for some of these platform players. But I think what's quite interesting is most of them realize pretty quickly that, okay, so we're not going to get international travelers in. Now let's start thinking about how we provide tours and activities at, London tours and activities to Londoners, because people in London have been able to start doing things again, which is an interesting thing because these platforms were always targeted at overseas or travelers, but they're having to think more like locals. And I think that speaks to an interesting development that we first saw in ground transportation, which was the likes of Uber was travelers and locals. And I think we're starting to see some of these tours and activities platforms realize the same thing, that they can target locals who want to, I haven't been to that museum for 10 years. I might as well go there. But it's an interesting shift in strategy for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a similar trend in Asia where you have these companies actually which did quite well, because they dug deep into local experiences. And now they found new markets and new consumers, right, for the longer haul. So fantastic. So we go to Priceline. I think Kevin mentioned it, but Pete, you wanted to call it up as Priceline acquiring Fly-In and what that means to the whole flight product online. So, Pete, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's a major acquisition that anybody has on their big acquisition radar of the past few months. But really, what it is a signal that Booking Holdings is interested in sourcing airline content, probably outside of the GDS. So airlines have been grounded for the past year. NDC hasn't been that big topic because airlines aren't retailing a whole lot of their seats right now. But as international travel picks back up, the battle over how intermediaries source airline content is surely going to heat back up. And the GDSs will remain in that picture, certainly. They're going to be that 800-pound gorilla and are developing their own tech to kind of, insert themselves into this airline retailing landscape. You see the rebrand of Travelport and all the effort they're putting into this retailing model. So it'll be interesting to see how this all develops.
Yeah, major battle ahead. Great for us journalists, right, Kevin, to write about.
Of
So
course.
another huge disruption too in corporate travel. So we have Amex GBT acquiring Agencia. This is only the tip of the iceberg, I reckon, right? Because we're gonna see continued consolidation in the TMC space and continued disruption. I want to go to Hopper, which is quite interesting, right? Hopper going into fintech. So similar as what we're seeing with Traveloka here. Like they got 3 payment services for their business. So Pete, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Hopper just raised another round of funding. Capital One announced a partnership, as well as Capital One participated in the funding. So it's kind of Hopper's big launch of their B2B business. And Hopper's, I suppose we can reflect back on Hotel Tonight as Sam founded that business around mobile only. Hopper followed that same direction. And initially it was a flight search business, but they're really doubling down on fintech and providing services like, price hold and refundable fares. They've just launched their hotel product. So they're really starting to gain traction. Fred Lalonde has hired more on his staff. So it looks like they're starting to really build a business around around that mobile play. It's millennial. It's interesting to see how that develops and whether they can truly start to compete with some of the bigger players in the market.
Yeah, we have 2 more destinations to go to, but with Traveloka, for example, what they're seeing is that with their buy now, pay later product, that's doing really, really well at this moment during COVID. So last 2 destinations, Google, free hotel listings. Kevin, how does this change the game for hoteliers?
Well, it changes the game that they get free hotel listings. That sounds pretty flippant, but this is it. The early analysis that we've seen, that we've published, is that it doesn't cannibalize the existing strategies that they had. They get a free listing. So in some respects, it's, hooray for the hotels. Now, where it gets interesting, and I think we still need a little while to see how this plays out, is the effect it has on OTAs. Now, as we know, the OTAs have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Google anyway. So I think what would be interesting to see over the next 3 or 4 months is, once there's a little bit more data in the books and stuff like that, is what do the OTAs make of it? Are they missing out because there is enough direct traffic, which there has been anyway? Let's not forget what's going on over the last year. There's been more direct bookings on hotels, but whether that either accelerates because of this arguably minor tweak, but a potentially significant one to the wider kind of intermediary kind of ecosystem, and how hotels and Google and OTAs kind of play in that. But it's an interesting move, and great for hotels.
Okay, so final point, Kayak. Partnering with Lifehouse to open a hotel in Miami. So really, we're seeing this blurring of the online and offline world. Pete, do you want to take a final comment on that development?
Yeah, I think to your point, blurring of offline and online, it's that trend of using tech to enhance a physical experience. And that definitely accelerated during the pandemic. We saw that all over the world. And this is just an example of a travel tech company testing opportunities to disrupt traditionally low-tech physical experiences, or maybe it's just Steve Hafner just getting bored with kayak and trying something different. So it's always interesting to see where
it's probably going to be his villa to have his visitors over.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the first Kayak Lifehouse hotel was in the same city in which he has his very expensive apartment, which we've also featured at a Phocuswright conference once before. But it is an interesting development. We interviewed the founder of Lifehouse for the How I Got Here podcast a couple of months ago. And, he understands that partnerships like this are perhaps where the kind of opportunities start working out for them, because you can open hotels and the Lifehouse product is very interesting, but you can potentially accelerate that if you do some smart collaboration with companies that perhaps you wouldn't have considered before. So it's an interesting development. Again, we just need to see how it really works out in about 6 months' time.
Okay, watch this space. So thank you, Kevin and Pete, for joining me on this road trip. And see you in Florida, okay, where you will be having a physical conference November 15th to 17th, right? And we'll have our reunion.
Can't wait.
Thanks.
Can't wait.
Pete
Thanks,
and Kevin.
Hoon.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn up.